When organizations embark on digital transformations, there are 5 common mistakes that they make. What are those 5 things? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And when we're helping clients through digital transformations, or when someone asks what causes digital transformation failure, or what are some of those biggest mistakes, it's easy to come up with a laundry list of dozens or maybe even hundreds of reasons why projects fail or mistakes that companies make while going through digital transformations. However, we've narrowed it down to 5 things, 5 core mistakes that organizations most commonly make. And if you can solve these 5 problems and avoid these 5 mistakes, you're not guaranteed success, but you're going to eliminate a lot of the risk that organizations so commonly face. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent, technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. One of the biggest mistakes organizations make when they go through a digital transformation is that they go in with unrealistic expectations. They expect that the implementation is going to take less time, less money, less resource commitment, less risk than is realistic. So when you're going into a digital transformation, you want to be sure you look with a realistic lens of what it's really going to take to get the job done right. Now, one of the reasons why organizations fall into this trap is because software vendors oftentimes will paint an overly optimistic picture and an overly optimistic set of assumptions around what could happen in a perfect world that might compress the timeline or compress the budget, minimize your risk, etc. But we live in reality, and the reality is that most of those assumptions that software vendors come in with are overly optimistic and don't reflect the reality. So it's really important that you have someone that's agnostic, that isn't trying to paint a rose-colored view of the world, but instead is looking at you as an organization, your culture, your ability to change, your ability to staff the project, your ability to execute the project, and come up with a plan that's realistic. And if you go in with realistic expectations, you're a lot less likely to make the problems that are caused by unrealistic expectations. When you have unrealistic expectations, you're forced later on to make bad decisions to cut scope or to compress the time frame or to fit a project into an unrealistic time frame that was never realistic to begin with. So that leads to a lot of problems later on. So if you can start with realistic expectations, that's one of the biggest mistakes you can avoid. The next mistake that organizations commonly make during digital transformations is they outsource the project too much to vendors. They defer too much to vendors. And it makes sense on the surface because as organizations, most of you are probably not ERP implementation experts. You don't do this for a living and you rely on outside experts that do it for a living, and that's understandable. But where it becomes a slippery slope or where it becomes dangerous is when you become overly dependent on the software vendors and when the software vendors start making decisions for you about how you're going to run your business. So the lesson here is that you can't outsource too much. You can leverage the outside expertise of third-party technology providers and software vendors, but ultimately you as an organization have to make decisions around your business. The other thing I'll note here is that the more successful organizations and the more successful transformations are the ones that manage the vendors well. They put project governance and guardrails in place to ensure that they are managing the software vendors rather than the other way around. A lack of effective program management is another mistake that's commonly made by digital transformation project teams. Reason for this is a lot of times organizations think that the software vendor is going to come in and manage the project for them, but the problem is the software vendor represents just one work stream in an overall transformation. When you're looking at your overall program, your software vendor is the one that's going to design, build, and deploy technology, but you have a number of other work streams and activities that you need to consider. Things like business process definition, organizational change, architecture, data, integration, all these different things that are important to the project, but aren't typically managed or managed well by your software vendor. So that's why you need to have program management in place to ensure that you have an overarching program governance, program plan, and again, so you're taking advantage of managing the software vendors rather than them managing you. Now, I dive into this topic of program management versus project management and helping understand how a program should look in a lot more detail in this video right here. Just watch this video, I whiteboard what a program should look like, and I dive into this concept of program management in more detail. The next mistake that organizations often make during their digital transformations is that they misunderstand organizational change management. I used to say that the real problem is people don't invest enough in organizational change management, which is true, but the reason they don't invest enough is because they don't understand it. And so that misunderstanding of change management is a real problem and a big mistake that organizations make. Now, first we have to recognize and come to grips with the fact that every organization is going to experience difficulty with change. People, no matter how well-intentioned, will resist the change, not because they're bad people, but because change is difficult. And the bigger the change, the more difficult it's going to be, and the slower the process is going to be, and the more important organizational change management is going to be. Now, the second reason why change management is so often misunderstood is because it's oftentimes viewed as a soft, touchy-feely, kumbaya-based activity that is a nice-to-have, but not absolutely essential to a project. And that couldn't be further from the truth. And the way to mitigate this, the good anecdote for this, is to develop a organizational change assessment to look at your organization, your culture, and where it is you're headed as an organization, and creating a very tailored, specific change strategy and plan that matches you and fits who you are as an organization. Too oftentimes organizations flip to the other extreme, which is to try every single change management play in their playbook that may or may not be impactful to their organization. So by doing a change assessment up front, you're able to create a more tailored change strategy that's more tailored to you as an organization. And that's one of the best ways that you can get past this risk of misunderstanding what change management is. Another big mistake organizations make during digital transformations is they don't focus enough time on making sure that their internal team is aligned before they get into the project. Too often organizations buy software, they commit a budget, and they just jump in and start designing and developing and deploying stuff. The more effective way around this, though, is to ensure that you take the time before you get started on the technology work stream. You take the time up front to make sure that everyone is on the same page, at least at the upper level of the organization, even down to the mid-level management, so that people understand the purpose of the project, what the strategy is, and how it ties to overarching goals and objectives of the organization. And a lot of times through that process, most of the time, you find that the team is not aligned, and that's okay. That's part of the messiness and the reality of human nature and organizational behavior. So we need to take the time to make sure we all get on the same page. We're all aligned on what our future state's going to look like, how much we're willing to change our processes, how much we're willing to standardize processes, how much change we're willing to impose on the organization. All those things you've got to figure out up front, because if you don't, what happens is you end up trying to make those decisions later on, which slows the project down. Or worse yet, the software vendor makes the decisions for you because they're trying to keep things moving along. So the more time you spend up front making sure that you've got that internal alignment, the more time and money you're going to save later. In fact, you're going to save exponentially more time and money later if you spend the time up front to do that. So I hope this has given you some guidance and some understanding of what some of these common mistakes are, but I'd love to hear what your take is. What common mistakes have you seen your organization or other organizations make during their digital transformations? I'd love to see your comments below. And if you'd like to learn more about digital transformation best practices, I encourage you to read our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. You can download it for free on our website by scanning the QR code right here, or go to the links below. So I hope you found this information useful, and hope you have a great day. But we live in a real The next mistake, organizations, I'm optimist. Okay. But you have a number, wow.